You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause, they have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to understand how to do that. But let's just be clear. The Democrats have taken a position. They will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
Let's make sure we make contraception accessible. Let's make sure that none of these state laws put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty for getting an abortion. Let's focus on how to save as many babies as we can.
Speaking as a man, they say men have trouble speaking on this issue. I don't think we need to be that way. It was my home state of Ohio, I'm upset about this, yesterday, that passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing.
I'm sorry. I knew I was going to break down laughing when I heard him say it again. The idea that men have had any reservations on speaking on women's bodies. It's so patently absurd. If you look at the makeup of the legislators passing these extremely regressive abortion bans, these extremely fascistic abortion bans, they are almost majority men voting to pass these pieces of legislation. Like, shut the hell up, dude. Speaking as a man who's, quite oppressed when it comes to the topic of asserting dominance over a woman's body, just absolutely absurd. And speaking of absurd, Chris Christie was the only candidate that actually went further and called out a little bit the pro-life movement.
Here's the bigger issue, Kirsten. The bigger issue is, and Tim began to touch on this, we're not pro-life for the whole life. To be pro-life for the whole life means that the life of a 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup is precious, and we should get treatment for her to restore her life. The 52-year-old who's drug addicted should make sure that any of his children who he's passed that addiction on to are treated well too. Pro-life's not just in the womb, Kirsten, it's for the whole life.
But we know, right, Jackson, that pro-life doesn't actually mean pro-life, right? It means pro-forced birth. It is just mostly men attempting to exert power over women's bodies, to control women. It has nothing to do with them caring about the so-called sanctity of life, because as Chris Christie just said, it doesn't extend beyond the womb. It ends the second that the fetus is born, and then whatever happens, to hell with it, right? We're not going to provide any resources for parents. We're not going to provide any housing or food assistance programs. We're going to make education as bad as possible. We're going to do that. And then we're gonna criminalize so many things that and create this school to prison pipeline in so many cases, because we just don't care about life. But to that point, it's unpopular, right? We talked about this. You and I got to talk about this a little bit yesterday. It is severely unpopular. So even if Chris Christie's message was true to what pro-life is supposed to mean, or in an idyllic world, what it should mean from whenever they believe that it has a life until death, right? But it doesn't mean that, because as long as you're arguing against abortion protections, you're going to be holding an unpopular position, and it's going to continue to drive people to the polls against you.
Yeah, because this is an issue that people can't really choose to ignore, because at the end of the day, human beings are very sexually active. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a part of our lives. And women and men, because this impacts both of us, you know what I'm saying? Like, bringing a child into the world impacts, obviously it's heavier on the woman overall, but this impacts society in general. So taking away the option for people to, bring children into the world in a more planned fashion, it's just a reflection of an idea in your head that we're really saving children. Like, you really think that. It's just ideology. So much to the point where I saw Chris Christie, he was on MSNBC, he was talking to Mika Brzezinski, and she made him stand on when he was saying, well, in New Jersey, women, it's technically legal to get an abortion at 9 months if it's like, something like severely wrong. And Mika was like, but this doesn't happen. Like, this is like such a low percentage. And he was like, well, I didn't say it happens. I said it can happen. Ultimately, I think what these Republicans don't realize, it seems that this is an issue to people who were alive when Roe v. Wade happened and who were mad about it. Like this old issue that they just need to give up, that even younger Republicans aren't on board with. You know, it's really extreme for these 6-week positions. It just is. And this old generation is really helping to destroy the Republican Party.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk in a little bit about how they can't reflect on their electoral losses. They're not like licking their wounds. They're just pretending it didn't happen entirely, and refusing to acknowledge that the abortion issue drives people to the polls.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.